Hello and welcome to Monday's episode of a Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. I am your host Craig Fowler and we are back for the final time in the 2024-25 season to talk about the Scottish Premiership weekend. We're going to mix up a little bit this time though. We're not going to go through every single game as we normally do and dissect it and talk through the big talking points. We will be talking through the biggest talking points from the Premiership weekend, but we'll do it more as a kind of grab bag episode, considering that half the matches which took place didn't really mean anything. Helping me to talk through all of that, and we'll probably touch on the Scotland squad at the end of the show because that was also announced today. It's Craig Anderson. Craig, how's it going?
Good, Jess. Enjoyed a Jeopardy-free day out at Rugby Park yesterday. Not the most enjoyable game, but nonetheless good to just turn up to the football. I think like one or two are like the optimum number of like dead rubbers like you want to carry in a season. I think it's fine, obviously, if your season goes to the end, but there's nothing worse than your season being done with like 5 games to go. It's just like, that's too many. But like having one wee game where you can just kind of enjoy yourself without worrying too much about the result is always good fun.
Yeah, well, Hearts was basically, as soon as they beat Ross County, that was the season over. But it's been fun. It's been fun to actually win football matches and finish the season with 4 consecutive victories and the first victory on the final day of the season since 2004.
That was mad. I only heard that. I hadn't noticed it. I only heard it on Sports Scene. It's astonishing that you could manage that.
That also included playing Gretna on the last day of the season and managing to lose that 1-0. Anyway, let's get to the biggest talking point from today. Dundee secured their survival in the top flight on Sunday with a 2-0 victory over St Johnstone, and yet, despite that, it was announced on Monday morning that Tony Docherty and his staff had been relieved of their duties. The board obviously not happy with the regression from last season to this one. Dundee were a top 6 side last season, and this campaign they've struggled at the bottom end for pretty much the majority of the campaign. It wasn't really until around about March time into April where they had a terrible run of results, so you thought, God, they really look like they could go down. Managed to rally enough to make themselves safe, but even still, they were the better team against St Johnstone. He deservedly won that game, but even like you're looking at Wednesday night against Ross County, drawing the game 1 each. We'll get to County soon enough. But like a County side that, like, as I spoke to Joel about on a Patreon where we reviewed the midweek games last week, that like a County side that had 5 centre-backs playing across the back 5 and 2 defensive midfielders, and yet were like the better team in the first half and deservedly, even though it was a very contentious penalty decision, deservedly left with a point in that one. And I don't know about you, Craig. I've seen some people saying like it's ridiculous to sack Docherty. I think it's a little bit out of the blue. I think it's a bit harsh. However, when you look at Dundee's goals against record this season and last, it's clear to me that there is something about his management style, technique, understanding of the game that he just can't put out a team with the ability to defend. Now, maybe consider just keeping Dundee up. It's fine enough. You maybe giving him another campaign and maybe kind of lean on him to fix those issues, or maybe to bring in, an outside coach to kind of help with that side of things. So I do think it's a little bit harsh to sack him, but at the same time, I do understand the reasons.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one because he's obviously a rookie manager, like in terms of this is only second season of manager, but he was also the oldest manager in the Premiership last season. So it's like you've got this weird dichotomy of like you can give him time to learn, but he's also been like part of a coaching staff. He's been involved as a coach for like well over a decade at this point. So it's like, where do you draw the line in terms of how much you think he will learn? Defensively, they're an absolute mess. I think their defensive performance against Kelly last week was one of the worst I've seen in a very long time. Like they were just getting cut wide open over and over again. I was really not impressed with them midweek against Ross County. I watched a chunk of that game. Second half, they stepped up a wee bit. They obviously did get the clean sheet yesterday, which is quite ironic given it will have been the defensive record that they did for them. But I think keeping a clean sheet against that St Johnstone team is not necessarily a huge achievement. I kind of was the same issue. I was like, saw the thing this morning. I was like, oh, fair enough, I suppose. Like, it wasn't something. I wasn't like I was sitting yesterday thinking, oh, like, you know, he's definitely going to be lucky to survive. But at the same time, it kind of felt like when they sacked Bowyer, to be honest. Like, obviously, that was a bit weirder because it was like just after they'd won the league. But also, you're like, they did win the league, but they did so in the most massively unconvincing way possible. And I felt he kind of really underperformed that season. And I think you've got the same with Docherty. Like, they've stayed up, but it would have been an absolute disaster to finish below either of the two teams that finished in the bottom two. So it's like the very, very, very bare minimum. And I think Dundee do have, some might call them delusions, but they have an eye on being a regular competitor for the top six, and they were nowhere near it this season.
Yeah, and I do wonder as well, like, it's a bit of a tough one to say because Tony Docherty did sign Simon Murray, and spending the six figures on Simon Murray, who was 31 at the time, was a major gamble, and it's a gamble that hugely paid off. So Docherty undoubtedly deserves credit for identifying him as a player that they needed and taking that risk when I think a lot of managers would have balked at the price for somebody at that age. But at the same time, he still got lucky to a degree, I would say, just because of how good Murray was this season with really little supporting cast around him. And if you're looking at how, I mean, I don't like doing this because it's like, well, if you take Murray out, it was like, well, you can't take Murray out because that's not actually what happened. But you know what I mean? It was just like the rest of the team built around him was just so underwhelming this past campaign, with a lot of guys just not rising to the fore and not being what Dundee needed them to be. And it's basically, I think what I'm saying, that's what would concern me if I was the Dundee board, is that his hit rate, when he did hit it like tremendously well with Murray. But otherwise, in terms of the players that he brought in this campaign, there was a lot more misses than there was hits. And if you're looking towards the summer and you're looking at turning over a squad of players again and trying to improve for next season, then that's something that might have spooked them as well.
Yeah, I think he didn't really seem to get the best out of quite a few players as well. Obviously, he did really get the best out of McKenzie last season, and it felt when he left, that left a bit of a hole. And up until the last few years, you'd say kind of Cameron had a pretty poor season for a guy who's obviously got. You can talk about Rangers scouting and whether, you know, I don't think he's a good signing for them, but he's done enough and he's got enough about him that he's caught their eye to the point they want to sign him. And yet, I would say for a large chunk of the season, he's not played well. He's obviously ended up, he got the 2 goals crucially yesterday. Obviously, one of them's a penalty, but he's and he scored 14 goals this season. So it's a bit weird to say he's had a disappointing season. But I think,
yeah, no, he is. He's managed to come through in some big moments, but he's also, unlike last season, his performances have been very up and down.
And they've had goalkeeping issues in the sense that he's not quite worked out what goalkeeper he's wanted. Talking about they paid the fee for Murray, they paid a big fee for Carson as well, if I remember rightly, last year. So they have backed him. I'd say they've spent a wee bit of money. Whether or not it was his choice, the various guys come over from Mexico, most of whom have not improved the team very much. So yeah, I think it feels like there's time for a natural break, but it's also one of these where it's like you could very easily appoint someone a bit worse.
Well, that's what I was going to come on to, because I think in isolation, sacking Tony Docherty isn't necessarily a terrible move off the back of this campaign, and he's been over his kind of deficiencies as a manager. If they're going to replace him with Sean Maloney, then it could end up being a decision where you're like, what on earth happened there? I mean, we're only a couple of years removed from James McPake getting sacked after consecutive victories, and again, in isolation, not the worst decision, but then he was replaced with Mark McGee, and that basically relegated them as soon as that decision was made. So is this going to be something similar? I would not be surprised.
Yes, well, some of the names flying about, you're already questioning that. And I mean, maybe I think, I'm not sure the two teams that get added to the league are going to be like miles better than what I've left. Like, maybe they could or they could not be. I don't think it's like some seasons, like last year when like Dundee United come up, you're like, that's probably an improvement. That was definitely an improvement on the Livingston team of last season. This year, St Johnstone are going, Falkirk are replacing them, and you're like, Falkirk could be good, but they've also got the bulk of a League One squad, and you've got Livy or Ross County. If Ross County win, we know what they're about, and they're not very good, and we'll talk about them. Livy could be good, but I think they're still going to be constrained by having a very similar style to what they had before, and it can work, but I'm not sure they've got the same quality of players they had the first time they were up. So I think it could be a time where you can take a wee bit of a gamble, but at the same time, it doesn't take a lot for a team to tailspin. Especially they were only like, I think they ended up 4 points better off than Ross County. It's not like they were 10 points clear or anything.
And on a personal level, I'm just a wee bit saddened that Docherty's away, because his Dundee team were, pound for pound, maybe the most entertaining to watch over the last 2 seasons. Probably like from one, I need to think about it a bit more, like from one season to the next, you maybe say, oh, this team at their best were a bit better. But over the course of 24 months, Dundee, you were always guaranteed goals and entertainment.
Yes, but most of them against them. That was probably why they didn't. 77 goals conceded this season kind of says it all.
Yeah, and even last season, I can't remember what the total was. It was 60s. It was definitely the 60s. 64 maybe, which was the highest by a team that finished in the top flight since Dunfermline in 2003-04. And that was the Dunfermline team that used to, whatever they were losing matches, take off 2 defenders and put on 2 forwards and play 2-4-4. So that's how bad they were defensively, and I think that is the reason why he's no longer in employment.
But you do have a point in the sense that as a neutral, you always want to have a variety of styles. You don't want everyone playing the same way, and they were quite a different team.
Yes, and speaking of entertainment and what I would like to see in the Scottish Premiership next season, or not like to see in the Scottish Premiership next season if they continue to play in this fashion, Ross County, who are going to be contesting the playoff final for the 3rd campaign in a row. This time they will meet Livingston, the first game taking place on Thursday evening, with the second leg on Monday. And they booked their place, unintentionally booked. It was booked for them after Dundee's victory and them only managing a draw against Motherwell on their final day of the season. And Craig, I'll just go to you, because I would just be repeating myself at this point. Again, it was a team. Ross County's problems are just being laid bare in recent weeks by the issues with Don Cowie's squad building. He's had 2 transfer windows. He's intentionally never signed a winger in either of them. Noah Chilvers was kind of holding it together in an attacking sense, that link between midfield and attack, one of the very few players in the squad that was a kind of naturally creative player. And it's just, he always plays 3 at the back, and he'll show off in the season at the wing-back positions. I think it's bad enough when teams play full-backs at the wing-back positions. He will often play centre-backs at the wing-back positions, and it was something that was witnessed again at the weekend. They've got a good player in Ronan Hale up front, but he doesn't get enough service, and Cowie weirdly dropped him for a period leading up to the split. And they're just not fun to watch, and I'm a bit fed up with them, to be honest. Sorry, any Ross County fans listening, but you're just boring the arse off me. I know that Livingston might not be great to watch next campaign, but there's a dirty bastard side to Livingston. Like Tony says, Livingston are the only club that it feels good that they've got a plastic pitch. They deserve that. It's like part of their identity. They're the bad guys. It's easy to root against them. County, it's not the same. It's just been, with the way that Cowie's constructed this team, it's just very dull. So if they do survive, and I don't want to call for somebody's job to go, but I'd either like Don Cowie to be replaced or him to actually go, do you know what? Maybe this isn't the way to play football.
Yeah, they're just... It's like they're not fun. They're not a fun team in any way. No. They do seem to cram a lot of defenders into the team. I think I said this when they played Killer, it might have been the week after, like having centre backs playing wing back, I just always find it's not fun to watch, because you want your wing backs to be able to maraud. You want them to be able to kind of do things in attacking positions rather than just being kind of physical guys who can maybe get up and down the line. And so it's the fact that they've finished 11th 3 seasons in a row, like should be setting off alarm bells of like, we need to change something drastically. And yet, I should say from the previous 2, you'd think, well, we've got to take a different approach. And Cowie kind of kept them up, and that was fine last year. But from that point onwards, like, he doesn't seem to have done a lot. I think Tony said he's kind of been a reactive manager at times, but I feel like he's kind of reverted to just try to defend his way out of it. And I think it doesn't suit the squad they've got either, because I think in order to kind of counterproductively, in order to defend well, you need to have a midfield that can attack, if you know what I mean, because then you're keeping the ball away for your goal. But instead they've just got a bunch of guys who kind of just sit right in front of the defenders. You saw it in that game because and it's been the case a couple of times with them. I said about it in midweek, they were the better team against Dundee, I would say, in the first half. They should have been ahead. And there becomes a bit of caution that comes into their game, and more so in this game when they did actually take the lead. It was like from the moment they went ahead, they really stopped trying to score. And it felt like that game was there for them. I mean, ultimately it wouldn't have mattered. They could have won, 50-0, it wouldn't have made any difference. But at that point, put some pressure on Dundee, have them see that you're roaring 2-0 ahead and they start worrying. But I just... There's not a lot to like about them. There's not a lot to enjoy to watch. I think Ronan Hale's the one player that I do enjoy watching. I think some of the sort of control on the ball and stuff like that, you watch him and you think he's like got a wee bit something different. Like even that bizarre one yesterday where the ball rebounds off the seats and he's not sure, so he just smashes it into the net. There's like stuff like that he does. I've seen him dribbling a few times. I like from that chance that the ref, I'm trying to remember who it was now, is it Don Robertson?
I think so.
Makes a wee gesture to him like, don't worry, we'll check it. And he's like, surely to fuck Don, you have seen the ball. It's not, I understand, but like the ball battered off the seats. It's not one of these where maybe it didn't hit the seats, maybe it actually hit a force field just in front of the goal line. But nonetheless, due diligence and all that.
Maybe he was just saying that because he felt like it was easier than trying to explain to him. He's just like, we'll check it, it's fine, go away.
But no, so he's been quite an enjoyable player to watch, and one that I would hope might stay in the Premiership if Ross County do go down. Of course, you always have that. If Ross County do go down, perhaps as they did the last time, they just continue running a Premiership squad and come straight back. Because for the second time in a row, I think they would be getting relegated into a fairly weak Championship. Although having said that, I suppose they did. If I'm not wrong in saying, they did pip Dundee United to that title, so it's not like there wasn't, biggish teams. This one's probably arguably weaker. Yeah, they got what they deserved. If out of this game, I think they could have lost it, and I think that's been the case. It's such a shocking run to go into the playoffs with, because they lose 7 in a row and then 2 draws. That's not good. And I think that's the difference going into the playoffs. Like, usually the teams that have struggled have been the ones that have been slumping their way in. I think if you've kind of battled your way to, either battled your way away from 12th into 11th, or if you've been like involved in a fight where you've been, slugging it out, then you can you're going in with a bit of momentum, but their confidence is going to be shot going into these. Now, that doesn't mean they can't bring it out over 2 games. We've seen it before, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of the playoff final, I mean, I think it's quite... Before I was saying that I felt that Livingston would beat County if that ended up being the matchup, just because of County's form, and for them to end up in that position, it wouldn't recover, so their confidence is going to be low. As I said, they've missed a very much a talismanic player, and Livingston will just be in better confidence going to the game. They beat Thistle across both legs. But the more people are just kind of like, County are going to go down. Livy are going to win this. The more I'm like, that's kind of giving me the opposite feeling now, because it's still going to be very tough for Livingston to come up. Because it just is. Like, there's only been, I think of all the playoff finals, there's maybe only been one when the team coming up, or the team from the Championship, was clearly like way and away better over the 2 legs, and that was Dundee against Killie, which was maybe kind of similar to what you were saying, a slumping team and one that had kind of, and a Dundee side that had very much got its act together towards the last couple of months of the season, kind of similar to this Livy one. So I would lean towards Livy, but when I look at both teams as well, like Livy have got, like, you look at Livy's squad, like Robbie Muirhead, it's never done it at the top flight level. He's had a great season at the Championship, but how does that translate against top flight opposition? Don't know. You look at like some of the players they've got in defence and that, Like Ryan McGowan had a good season at St Johnstone last campaign, like the campaign before this one. Would he have had as good a season this time around? Would he have still been a Premiership quality defender? Unsure about that. And there's just a lot of question marks about kind of guys throughout that Livy side that I don't think it's necessarily cut and dried that they're going to go and then just kind of wipe the floor with County. I think it's going to be a very tough couple of fixtures that will be, in my opinion, will be decided by a goal or possibly even penalties.
It's I'm sure it's the battle Sky we're hoping for when they've got the rights for these playoff games. It's like you know that it's not a disrespect to the clubs in the sense that if you earn your right to be in the Premiership, you do deserve to be there. But it's not like there's going to be packed out stadiums and stuff like that for these games. Even we've seen that with Livy in the playoffs before. I would say there is though a bit of similarity to when Livy won through the playoffs the last time, and that they've kind of timed it. They've been hitting form at the right time. They played a Partick Thistle team who were kind of slumping, and they kind of comfortably got over the line. I do agree with you that this one, I don't think it's going to be kind of one-sided, but I give them the edge just on that basis and the fact that they have experience on their side in terms of the players they have. I think the depth of Ross County squad is not really there. Livy have a very good goalkeeper, which I think could make a good bit of difference as well. But at the same time, you're right, because they even look at the centre-half pairing and it's Danny Wilson, who it's been a long time since he's really been considered a Premiership player, and McGowan, who very good at the Championship level, but was part of a pretty stinking St Johnstone team last year. I'm sure that was last year anyway, or did they go down with them last year? I've lost track of which summer that happened, but he was definitely part of a St Johnstone team that struggled, and he's but I just think on the whole of it, I expect to see Livy win now, just on the basis that I think County, unless they can pull something out of nowhere, like maybe like they did when they were 3 goals behind against Partick Thistle with 20 minutes to go, that maybe their kind of goose is cooked at this point, but we will wait and see.
There's also a slight advantage for Livingston in terms of how so it's part of this is part of the kind of massive myth that the Premiership and Championship the Premiership playoffs are weighted so heavily in favour of a top flight team because, you know, third and fourth have to play each other double leg, and then second against the winner of that then has to play a double leg, and all that. So many games before you're then playing a double legged final. But what people always seem to forget about this is that the Championship season ends sooner. So over the last few weeks, Livingston have actually played 1 game fewer than Ross County, because County, I think it's more of an advantage for the top flight side when it's a season, and this kind of happens occasionally, but I think more often than not, there's usually a midweek fixture post-split, and it's usually the penultimate fixture, but that's not always happened. This campaign we have had it, so it's not even a case of Livingston have done like midweek to weekend, and that's going to kind of sap their legs and be a disadvantage to them, because County have also done it as well, and these were games that mattered to County. So it was even like a case of they had the ability to rest players. And even if Thistle had made it, it would have only been 1 more game for Thistle compared to County. So yeah, just getting that off my chest, because I'm sick of people going on about how much it is heavily weighted towards the Premiership clubs. There is advantages to be found, but if you're going to finish third or fourth of the Championship, don't you deserve disadvantages against you rather than the team that finishes second?
I agree with you. I think there are ways you can restructure it, but while the leagues don't finish at the same time, it's always kind of going to be there's going to be a bit of a mismatch there. I think it's, if people ask for a straight 50-50 playoff, like between the Premiership and the Championship as an 11th v second, like this is just the equivalent of this, but with a couple of extra games tagged on, like at the Championship side. But yeah, I think the imbalance and the results in the playoffs have been more about the quality, to be honest. Yeah. I think it's just that the Premiership teams tend to be better, but I don't think it's a clear-cut case this time at all. For that, I think Livingston, the way they've put it together that recently, and they did beat County up there in the Cup. Now, that's not necessarily a guide. Ross County have not exactly been a strong cup team at any point, but not since they won the League Cup anyway, not in recent years. I will find the games quite interesting. I don't think they're going to be good, but I think they're going to be interesting.
Right, let's move on to discussing some of the big talking points around the game on Saturday, and that was Dundee United coming from behind to defeat Aberdeen 2-1 and to clinch European football when it was looking a little bit hairy for a minute there when St Mirren were leading against Celtic, but Aberdeen managed to quickly overturn a 1-goal deficit with a couple of quick second half goals, eventually sought out to win the game 2-1, jumping above Aberdeen in the league table to finish fourth. And I mean, there's been a lot of weird seasons in Scottish football this campaign. Is there any weirder than Aberdeen's? Like, and considering they looked like, but no, they didn't really look like genuine title contenders because we know Scottish football too well. But if you didn't know Scottish football too well, you would have looked at them early in the campaign and said they're genuine title contenders. And then they finish the campaign in a dreadful form, fall behind their former manager, who's in charge of a team that's just been promoted. And then to make matters even worse, an Aberdeen fan then disgraces himself, the club, by throwing a seat on the park, presumably aiming for Dundee United fans who had a pitch invasion after securing fourth in European football, but instead hits Jack McKenzie. A really nasty looking incident there with McKenzie requiring stitches. One of those moments where, like, one of those moments that remind you that this shit is actually quite dangerous. You see stuff chucked to the park before, you just kind of shrug it off because it doesn't hit anybody. You're just like, oh, that's shocking. And people will be like, oh, what happens if it hits somebody? But it's just easy as a fan to be like, well, it didn't. So, like, you don't have to necessarily get your knickers in a twist that much. But ultimately, this continues to happen. It is going to hurt somebody, and it did on this occasion.
Yeah, I think people are kind of, I mean, we can maybe talk about pitch invasions later on, but people are trying to kind of combine the two things of pitch invasions and stuff getting thrown. Pitch invasions generally are not dangerous to people. No. Some people might not like them. Some people might kind of question what's going on. But barring the odd occasion, and that's on that person where someone actually has a go at people, pitch invasions are just kind of an expression of joy. Some of it might be a bit forced at times. But yeah, chucking stuff, I don't understand like what possesses you to chuck stuff. And I think there's a difference, like if folk chuck, like, I saw like a lot of stuff going on about chucking a plastic cups at the Euros. And while that's a bit daft, it's like a plastic cup is not going to do anyone any harm. Chucking pie, you see folk chucking pies and stuff, and you're like, it's a bit of a laugh. There's the one with Lauren Shankland where he took a bite out of it or whatever.
Yeah, I caught it, yeah.
Something he's had a lot of experience of in his life, I suspect.
But that, even that moment, he caught the pie, but there was like a half bottle thrown at him at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. But so like stuff like that, you can kind of get away with, like whatever. But yeah, chucking bottles at people, if someone gets hit by that, it's going to cause bother. And with this one, it's like, yeah, if you launch a chair full pelt at someone, and the reality is, if that hadn't hit Jack McKenzie, if that had hit a fan on the pitch, probably less would have been made of it, but it's still a bit of a worry that folk can't behave themselves, I suppose.
And it was quite scary as well that it hit him basically right on the eye. You can see from it, like, it takes the impact on his cheekbone and like right above his eyebrow, but a slightly different angle, and that's you don't even want to think what could have ended up happening there. But on the park, just like mad again that Aberdeen. I watched this game. I didn't really have much faith in Aberdeen to get a result. I thought kind of coming into it, they were just about the best type of opposition for Dundee United, considering United were in a bit of a slump, needed rousing out of it. I thought the best opposition was an Aberdeen team that looked like they were a bit gutless in recent games against Rangers and Celtic, lacking a bit of heart, a bit of belief. And then obviously, because it's Aberdeen and Dundee United with their history, it was just easy enough for the crowd, the players to rouse themselves. Obviously, Europe's on the line as well. Whereas for Aberdeen, it was confirmed. I thought that was all kind of together as a perfect kind of melting pot, perfect storm for Dundee United to go out and to beat Aberdeen. Now, they did do that, but the game went very different to what I thought. Aberdeen was very much the better team in the opening half hour. Dundee United came back in a little bit in the first half, but then even still, you get that Kevin Nisbet chance. After, to be fair, United had started the second half a bit better with Trapanovsky missing a good opportunity. But then you get that Nisbet chance to make it 2-0, and I think if they made it 2-0, that would have been it, and Aberdeen would have won that game quite comfortably. But as soon as it starts to go badly, they just fold again. And they were lucky not to concede a third, like right after conceding the two, with Mitov's terrible attempted pass and Louis Moat going through, then Mitov managing to save himself with a good stop. But I mean, they've got one more game left this season, but there's just nothing. I still back what I'm saying. I think they'll give Celtic a better game than people will think, but you just can't look at them and think that they've got the minerals really to go to Hampden and to pull off that upset.
I think I've got on to Aberdeen in general, but in terms of the cup final next week, the first 15 minutes will be important, because I think if Aberdeen lose a goal in the first 15 minutes, it could be a repeat of that semi-final from November, I want to say. But if they can kind of hold out the game, I think with this Celtic team, you have seen, and I mean, you saw at the weekend again, they've been frustrated quite a lot this season by teams. So I think that'll lean on it. But for Aberdeen, it must be a massive disappointment of a season. They have spent a lot of money on the squad. You know, I'm saying it like they've spent money because they've brought in money. It's not like they've chucked money they don't have at the squad, but they have, I would say, £3-4 million worth of signings probably in that squad, and to finish behind Jim Goodwin's bunch of kind of ragamuffin waifs and strays. I'm not saying Dundee United haven't spent a bit of money. Like they'll all have chucked a wee bit of money at the squad, but it doesn't look like an expensively assembled squad. They actually went out and probably pushed the boat out in January a wee bit with the signings of Campbell and Payton, neither of which really worked out. But they have ended up, behind that team, and I think that's a pretty bad indictment on where they've been since that really, really impressive spell at the start of the season. The jury is therefore, I would say, out for Thielen. Like, I wouldn't say he's at the stage of being worried about the sack or anything, but if he continues the first half of next season the way he's finished, basically the way he's been since October, that's not any worse than what Barry Robson gets sacked for. It's not any worse than probably what Goodwin gets sacked for, to be honest, especially if he happens to also manage to lose a cup tie to a sixth-tier team, which he probably won't. And but you know what I mean, like if you just took them from October onwards, they've been hopeless. Like they've really, it feels a bit stupid to say they are only even qualified for Europe because of the start, because the start is part of the season. But it's like if you took it, I think if you took it from that first defeat onwards, they would be bottom. And it feels like had the season gone about 2 more games, St Mirren would probably have finished above them. So there's a bit to worry about for Aberdeen, I would say, and I feel like you saw it. I feel there's no identity to that team. There's nothing really to take away. There's just guys there who you're like, who are you? What are you doing here? You don't have it. But maybe they will prove us wrong with a summer behind them and all that. But it's I would really worry about the direction they're heading in.
Anything to say on, I'm trying to think of something to say on Dundee United that we haven't said already. I mean, it was a Patreon, so maybe I should just kind of repeat what I was saying on Friday's Patreon podcast with Joel for our free-to-air audience. But it is just, it kind of caps off a great turnaround for the club, and fair play to Jim Goodwin. Actually, I think that's probably the most interesting angle in this. Like, when he took charge of United, his reputation could scarcely have been lower, with that sacking at Aberdeen, losing to Darvel. Then he takes over United, initially gets a bit of a boost out of them, and then loses all 5 post-split games. They're relegated. And it was even not a massive surprise, but a little bit of a surprise that he was even kept on. I don't think the fans were entirely happy about that. And you just kind of, and then they start life in the Championship by losing their first Premier Sports Cup group stage game to Spartans. And you're thinking, bloody hell. And even in the Championship season, it was a bit harsh on Goodwin because Wraith were a good second place team. But because Wraith were on their coattails for so long and pushing them for so long, it didn't even look like that much of a commanding title win. So there was then still question marks going into this season. But he's surely got a lot of credit in the bank now to lead them all the way back to 4th place, the first season back in the top flight, and back into Europe again. Although, last time they were in Europe, they got relegated the next season. So anything better than that is a bonus for them.
It's funny, but I really like Goodwin. I think he's obviously the time at Aberdeen went really, really badly for him, as we touched on there. But he was a wee bit unlucky to an extent because he took over with them already in a bit of a bad way, and he did manage to. It was when Glass got sacked, and he kind of saved them from any lingering relegation battle in that first part, and then he just never really managed to get them off the ground. And I think he's probably just a manager who's not that well suited to working with a huge budget. He's kind of I would say even Dundee United is maybe a slightly too big club for him, if you know what I mean, in terms of where his strengths lie. His strengths lie in the same way as a Stephen Robinson, I would say, where it's a St Mirren, a Kilmarnock, a Motherwell, that type of team. But because of the way he's come in at Dundee United, they've been already that's the kind of level that they were at because they've just come up and they're maybe signing from that same pool and whatever. But I think he's done really well because I think their squad is really not very good this season, and he's managed to get a heck of a lot out of it. So I think a lot of the credit for the performances comes from Goodwin.
Yeah, not only that, but also Kevin Holt, going in January, really was you wouldn't have thought it, but it was a kind of deck of cards kind of moment where they kind of crumbled a little bit due to that, because he was having a really good season and he was also part of that back three that worked so well, and without him the back three kind of stopped functioning as much. And they're kind of two marquee signings last summer, Trapanovsky and Babunski, and they're not terrible. They're not dreadful signings, but they've not been what was expected of them. So to kind of overcome all that and to have the season they've done, yeah, absolutely fair play. Right, let's talk about a couple of refereeing decisions. Craig, you are I don't know if you still count as being, but you at least at one time you were a fully qualified SFA referee. So let's begin at Easter Road, the game which took place on Saturday. 2-2 draw between Hibs and Rangers, and a dead rubber for both teams. But there was a bit of controversy where Rangers leading 1-0 through a Cyril Dessers goal, looked to have the ball in the back of the net for a second time. Nico Raskin, I believe it was, with Rocky Bashiri clearing it, but it looked like the ball having Bashiri touched it, then hit the post, went backwards. Bashiri looked quite over the line. He then touched it again. No goal was given. Hibs go down the other end and score, and Rangers are furious about it. It's releasing statements about it and everything coming out and questioning VAR's effectiveness, etc., etc. What did you make of this?
So first of all, he said it hit the back of the net, which is probably the least appropriate way of describing. No. When you said Rangers thought they'd hit the back of the net. Literally the least apt way to describe a goal of all time. In this case, it's hard, right? Because is the ball in? Probably, but I think it's nowhere near as you see these images and they're never anywhere near as clear cut as you think they are. And I'll say this all the time with balls kind of in and out. Unless you have an angle looking along the line, sometimes these ones from high and wide can be quite deceptive. So I don't think the decision made by VAR and all the rest of it can really, I don't think they can make a decision on it. I don't think they had any evidence to show it was definitely a goal. And it should be. You obviously saw at the same stadium. Hibs have definitely, I would say, ridden the luck a wee bit with these recently, because you saw at the same stadium in the Celtic game, that Celtic goal was disallowed for a similar situation where the ball was probably out, I would say, but there's no way they could make that decision. And indeed, Alan Muir lost his job off the fact that
that's what I was going to say. That surely that one is influenced the other, because Alan Muir lost his job off the back end because he was guessing in that moment, and it wasn't his only mistake. It was kind of, I think, more of a kind of straw that broke the camel's back. But because he lost that job, if you're in the VAR room, I don't know who it was on Saturday, but if you're in the VAR room and you've got that similar thing, it's well, there is no absolutely 100% conclusive proof angle. I do think it is over the line. But if you're thinking then in that territory, well, the last time at this stadium where somebody made a educated guess, he lost his job. And if I'm going to do the same, what's going to happen to me?
Yeah, but I think that's right, because you can't just make a decision by guessing. Either you can show that the referee is clearly wrong, or you can't make a decision. Do I think it was in? Probably, but I saw a couple of people sharing. I mean, you can obviously remember the Japan goal from the World Cup a couple of years ago, where it looked ludicrous that the goal got given, because you're like, that ball was miles out, and then you kind of see the angle where you're like, oh no, actually when you look along the line, it's just in. And you had, I saw a picture of the famous Liverpool Man City game from, what I say, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever it was, where it's like the kind of big title decider between them, and the ball it's very similar in terms of how it looks. For all the world, you think it's over the line, but the goal line technology said it wasn't, and you could kind of see an angle where it turns out it wasn't. So I do think it is very easy to be fooled by being at that perspective, and I think the assistant could have been a wee bit closer to the line, but he's not that badly placed. But if he doesn't give the decision right or wrong, I think unless VR's got something better than it had, it can't do anything. Do I think that means we should have goal line technology? Not really, because this happens about, once a season?
If you want to get goal line technology, for what we've heard, goal line technology costs a lot. In fact, it costs just about as much, or maybe even more, to get than VAR. So now, if you want to say, let's just get goal line technology instead of VAR, I'd be perfectly happy with that. However, I don't think they're going to go for that because of what Craig says, and just the fact that it's just not used, and it just won't be used enough, that the clubs will just be like, well, why are we paying all this money for something that, in the cases of some clubs, it probably won't even be necessary like once in an entire season for like one or two teams. So, but either that or you bring it in on top of VAR, and it'll cost teams £500,000 per season. And I mean, that's fine if you're Celtic or Rangers, and it's fine-ish if you're Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen. Further you go down, though. I mean, if you're Livy coming into the league next season, or like Livy and Falkirk are going to have to rip up their pitch soon as well, and you're asking them to pay £500,000 on top of that just because we're desperate to get as many of these decisions right as possible, and yet still decisions don't get made right on a weekly basis, then nah, fuck that.
Yeah, it's just it feels a waste to me. It's fortunately, to an extent, this is a dead rubber. It doesn't stop Rangers moaning about it, and again, I feel most clubs probably would in this situation. Yeah. Like have I don't think they necessarily make an official statement the way Rangers do, but it's again another way to kind of detract from a poor season and sneak out the news about Ferguson kind of quietly and have something else to go on about. But on that, yeah, it's just it's annoying, but we'll live. Like it's a decision that could happen. Like there was mistakes from everyone in this game. It felt like it was quite a mistake-laden game in general, and I would just rather we got on with it. It was obviously particularly because Hibs went right up the park and scored. It makes it I was talking about it in terms of the Kelly St Johnstone game a couple of weeks ago, where Kelly have a penalty appeal. It goes up the other end, and I think it was Uche nearly scores. And then they go back and give Kelly the penalty, where we've not seen it yet in Scottish football, where you've had this sort of 2-goal swing situation. Yeah. It makes us so much more pressure on that, because it's basically worth 2 goals. It's either 2-0 to Rangers or it's 1 each.
Yeah.
With that decision, so it's like it's about as high pressured as you could get, but that's always going to be the risk with VAR. If you have something that's judging things after the fact, well, things are going to happen in between the event happening and the decision being made. But yeah, I just think it's one of these things you just have to accept.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Right, the other big decision was a red card, which took place on Sunday, again, a dead rubber. And it actually didn't even impact the outcome of the match, because Hearts ended up coming away with a 1-0 win thanks to a late Stephen Kingsley goal. But Jan Danda was sent off in the first half for a moment where he was fouled, but then after the foul took place, he went in with studs into the leg of Stuart Findlay, and after a VAR check was sent off. I'm still not entirely certain what I think about this, because I can certainly understand where the majority of Hearts fans are saying, well, he's been fouled, and he's the foot that goes into Findlay is the same foot that is kicked from behind by Watson. My take on it initially from the angles, and even watching it in real-time speeds back as well, was that he kind of hesitates a little bit and doesn't necessarily need to put his foot where it is. And I don't think he's being malicious at all. I think he's just being careless, which is in the rules, but he's being careless and endangering the safety of an opponent at the same time, just because of where his foot ended up going. It went like halfway down the leg of Finlay, kind of one of those ones where at the wrong angle, if the player's foot is planted in the ground, that's like a potential leg breaker. So it's kind of one of those ones where I can see it from both angles, and that he definitely has my sympathy. But when you're just seeing a tackle like that, and I don't think it's basically, and I just don't think it's quite enough that his leg has been forced fully into that by Watson's tackle. I think he has been kicked and he has been fouled, but could he have put his leg elsewhere? I think possibly.
That was my view. So I should say from being at the game, the tackle, it was down the opposite end for me. So the tackle goes, or the thing goes in, and the referee obviously gives that free kick, and Finlay goes down injured, and Dan does kind of down a wee bit as well. And to me, what I thought was that Watson had kind of nicked the ball through the back, and then there was a collision. And I actually, at the time, thought that's quite a harsh free kick. And then they start talking about a VAR review, and I am pretty sure everyone in that stadium thought they were checking for a red card for a Kelly player. And then it was only when he goes over and everyone's like, oh, here we go. And then he then makes a decision and gestures over a Hearts player. And so everyone was going daft at that point, because it was just like, where does this all come from? I saw after the game a couple of angles where I was like, that looks like a really, really bad decision, where it's like, it was the ones kind of from side on. But when you see the VAR angle that they showed on Sports Scene, I kind of agree with you. I think whether or not Dan meant it, you can't tell, but the way his foot goes after that seems weird to me. Like it doesn't look natural.
It just looked a bit unnatural to me.
And it's not like, Jan Danda's not the first player you think of when you're like thinking of someone that's going to go out and try and do somebody. The first tackle I've seen him making this entire time in Scottish football, to be honest. But it just did look a bit off in terms of the way he goes in. I did find it very weird that the decision after the red card was for a free kick to Kelly, because surely regardless of whether or not that's a red card, the original foul the referee gave did happen.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's not hugely relevant. I thought it was a shame. Chris Burke even said it post-match, he thought it kind of spoiled the game a wee bit. And I kind of agreed with him, because at that point it was like I thought Kelly started quite brightly and then faded a bit, and I think it really did at that point. It became a daft game. Because Kelly threw caution to the wind. Like Burke took off. I think Finlay must have been feeling the effects of it, but he brought on Bruce Anderson, and we had a back three of Brad Lyons, Lewis Mayo, and Corey Ndaba for the rest of the game. It was just like, there was just a nonsense. There was just players getting chucked on, and it was just like proper end of season stuff. And I feel like had it been 11v11, there might have still more resembled a football match a little bit. But yeah, it was, to me, yeah, just a bit of I don't think it needed to be a red card, but I can understand that it looks pretty bad. And Finlay was injured by it. I don't know how seriously, but yeah, it was just a bit of a weird one.
And finally, while we're reviewing the Scottish Premiership weekend, the last game that we've not touched upon yet was Celtic against St Mirren on Saturday, a 1-1 draw with Celtic scoring 4 minutes into stoppage time to deny St Mirren a victory. With Dundee United defeating Aberdeen, they wouldn't have moved from 6th place anyway, but it's still obviously disappointing to be seconds away from winning it at Celtic Park and that to be taken away from you. But it was still quite a good moment with James Forrest being the man to get a goal, which meant that for 16 consecutive seasons, he has scored a goal for Celtic in a game. Now, I don't think that's necessarily as much of I don't think it's quite as much of an achievement in itself in terms of the goal scoring aspect of it, because he is a Celtic forward, essentially. He's a wide forward, but he's a forward. And he's been quite good at goal scoring through his entire career. And he's played in 32 games overall this season. So It's like that aspect, but it's more about the longevity and the fact that this season, and with that league title, he came out holding the Scottish Premiership crown. That's him, Celtic's most decorated ever player. And while I don't think the goal thing itself is all that, it is impressive, but it's more the longevity to be at Celtic for 16 seasons and to be good enough that you're kept at a club like that for 16 seasons, and then to have that final moment on the last day of the season where you're already planning on you bringing out the trophy anyway to get the equaliser. I think if anybody in like a Celtic fan at the game would have picked any player to score that goal, it would have been James Forrest. So that was a good moment, and you could, in what was a dead rubber for Celtic, you really hear the kind of explosion of emotion when the ball hit the back of the net after Zach Cameron had dived out the way of it.
Yeah, I thought, Heaven's getting a bit of stick for that, but also, is it Marcus Fraser? His clearance is one of the worst clearances I've ever seen. I should say that. I said that it was one of the worst clearances I've ever seen until Marley Watkins, one that led to the Hearts goal yesterday. But nonetheless, yeah, it was just really, really poor from St Mirren. But yeah, I agree. Incidentally, was that Tifo thing meant to be of James Forrest? Because it didn't look anything like him.
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's right. Any half-decent attacking player who's been at Celtic for 16 years probably will score in every season, but being able to be at Celtic for 16 seasons is kind of the achievement in itself. And I think Forrest is probably a pretty underrated player in terms of his kind of contribution to Scottish football over the last while. Obviously, the fact he's probably generally underperformed for the national team when he has had chances has probably not helped that. But he will go down as one of the kind of greats of Celtic, you would have to say, being so heavily related to this successful era. For St Mirren, ultimately it didn't matter because of that Dundee United win, but it would have been a wee bit of a disappointment for them because I think they put a heck of a lot into that, and they probably, while it's not, I think you can never really say in these games that they would have deserved to win because Celtic did have loads of chances, and Hemming himself had made a number of really good saves before that one as well. They had put a lot into it. They defended really, really well. It was a very nice goal from Ayunga, and they kind of did everything that you would want. And it would have been an incredible achievement to take 13 points post-split. Even getting 11 is still very good. But they just fell a wee bit short. But I think they would have been more raging if the results had gone the other way and that had been a goal that had stopped them qualifying for Europe. Very good season for them. I think I spoke at length about that recently. But 3 in a row is tough, and now they'll be looking, obviously, can they manage a 4th season in the top 6? Because that's got to be their aim.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, before we finish, Scotland squad came out today for the 2 friendly matches. I'm just going to admit right now, I'm not going to be bothered watching any of them. I really don't like friendlies whatsoever. But Craig, you are a big Tartan Army man. Will you be watching? And if so, with this squad coming out, what's catching your eye the most?
So I'm on holiday, so no, I won't be probably.
So nobody cares.
These games are going to be I very rarely don't see Scotland games. But these games are going to be non-canon, along with the friendlies against France and Italy in, I want to say, 2016, because I was living in Australia at that point, and they were in the middle of the night, and I was away for the weekend as well. And I was like, I am not going to watch these games. So anything that happened in those games, it doesn't count for me. And I think these 2 are going to be the same, because I'm not going to bother seeking out, because I think the Nations League's on, and I think Spain are in it, and I'm going to be in Spain, so I'll be watching that instead. But I thought that it's an interesting squad in that there's obviously some new faces. There's quite a few uncapped players, and it's a first. The only player who's not been called up before is Kieran Bowie. It seems a wee bit early to me, but also who else?
When James Wilson's still there,
yeah.
I don't know how early it is.
There's 5 strikers in the squad, which seems quite a lot for a team that typically plays with 1. But I don't mind it in the sense that I think Bowie's got a lot about him. He's performed well for the under-21s, and if you're not if it's a game like this, it's probably the time to give him a go. I think Wilson still being in there is a bit odd. I think he could have done with not. to be honest.
Yeah, I think he could do my rest at the end of the season. He's played a lot of football, and you can see his performances have dipped as the season's kind of come towards a close. So, yeah, I don't really understand that.
It's maybe, I often wonder if it's that way of like, I don't mean a point being proved, but there's like a kind of showing, if you're young, you're going to get a chance here, and also not wanting people to feel like they're dropped at that age.
Yeah,
but yeah, it feels a bit weird to me. But other uncapped players in the goalkeeper situations, I think Craig Gordon's. I mean, we should be phasing Craig Gordon out anyway, but I think he is also injured. And Liam Kelly apparently is injured. He managed to play for Rangers at the weekend, so who knows? But Clark said he was, because that seemed a bit weird that he's not in. So we've got Angus Gunn, who will presumably play both games, because I don't think there's actually any point in giving games to Kieran Slicker, who has been Ipswich sub-goalkeeper all season, and Robbie McCrory, who has been second choice for Kelly for most of the second part of the season. So that's a troublesome position. You've got Josh Doig, he's just won Serie B, uncapped as well in the squad. Interestingly, Ryan Porteous dropped. I do wonder if his tackle immediately after he came on in Athens is kind of done for him here, because he wasn't on the bench for the second leg of that, and now he's been dropped. He's not had the best finish this season at Preston. Who else was new in the squad? Miller's back in. I did wonder if he would be back in after his kind of comments the last time, but he is there. I would hope he'll get his debut this time. I think he's one that you can tell a mile away is just a talent. And who else is uncapped in the squad? I'm trying to think now. It's mostly in the midfield. Andy Irving's back in. Don't think he's good enough, but he's also played some Premier League football this season, so why not? And there's one other uncapped player who's I'm going blank on.
Doig be capped?
No, he's not. He's not. Again, he's in a hard position where it's like. Also, you're behind Andy Robertson, but you would hope he's been in. I think he's been in squads for about 4 years at this point, so he's worth a look. He's worth a go. Like Connor Barron, the ghost of Connor Barron, constantly popping up in Scotland squads is the other one. I don't see much of I don't see much in him, but he is also fairly young and playing most weeks for Rangers, so it's like maybe I am wrong. But I don't know. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting. The things I want to see out of this is hopefully Nathan Patterson getting a run again to see what he's about, and Johnston likewise, because I think Ralston's been overly criticised, to be honest. I think he's mostly done fine when he's been playing, but
Ralston's going to play both games.
maybe, but it's one of these. Like, Ralston's not even that old, but it's just like he's not the option. He's not the answer. Hopefully, come October, we might be able to have Aaron Hickey back in the team, or September, or whenever the qualifiers are. But he's obviously not quite fit for that yet. But I would like to see Patterson getting a go. And Johnston obviously got his debut. They're doing their best not to, but he's probably going to win the Austrian League for a second season, and he's actually been playing this season unlike last, so hopefully he gets a wee shot there. And then apart from that, I don't know. I think it's a bit of it's 2 games against poor opposition. You'd hope to win them both. Maybe we can get John McGinn sort of racking up the goals, see if we can get close to that record. He's still got a way to go. And I suspect we'll see a few dropouts if Napoli win the league. Do you think McTominay and Gilmore are going to bother with this? I don't know. They've got the time for it, but I just wonder if there will be a few changes before it happens.
What do you think? Do you think the squad could have been a bit more experimental, or is it just because you don't want to be like too much of like a B team at the same time, don't you?
Well, I think there are enough kind of guys. I think I was looking up. I think 12 out of the 25 weren't in the Euro squad, so it's not like Kenny McLean's not in there, which is interesting. I think he's worth a place in the squad ahead of Andy Irving still. But like I can understand, like you kind of if he is being phased out, then fair enough. But I think I would have liked that. This sounds ridiculous. I would have liked to have seen Ollie Burke back in the squad, because he's been doing well enough in the Bundesliga, and I think he would offer a wee bit different in attack because Doak's not there. But yeah, I don't think there are exactly loads of players that can feel really aggrieved to have missed out. I don't think so. So in that sense, being experimental, because I've seen folks saying I agree with it. If Doak's not there, what are you doing out wide? Well, we don't have any wingers in this squad really. So, but which winger is there that you think should be called up that isn't? And that's why I said Burke. Like, he's not really a winger, but he could kind of play off the wide area. But he's also like 28. It's not. There's no benefit to it to an extent. So I think it's experimental enough that he's got the core of the players, but there are a lot of guys who could do with some more games for Scotland who will hopefully get them. And if that's what we take out of it, then good. But I'm sure we'll see 3 or 4 more added, to be honest, before these start, because the June games are bad enough in their qualifiers, but having 2 friendlies in June, I think some of the guys might not fancy it, and fine.
Who could blame them?
If I'm not even watching it, then how can I criticise somebody for not wanting to turn up and play in it?
Right, Craig, thank you very much for joining me on this episode.
You're welcome.
And thank you to everybody for listening. If you'd like to hear more, then please check out the Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast, where for as little as £2 a month, you can unlock hours of bonus shows. There is quite a bit going up this week. I have already recorded 2 podcasts today for the Patreon, and I will be looking to do another one tonight, and there is more coming up during the week. So while we will soon be powering down on the main shows, we will be back, obviously, next weekend to review the playoff semi-final second leg and the Scottish Cup final. We'll also have a bonus one later this week for the playoff first leg, and also Sean and Telfar kind of recapping the lower league season. But the Patreon will continue on for the next few weeks at least. So if you soon decide that you're starting to miss us, as we're not going to be doing Monday, Thursday every single week after next week, then Patreon is where to find your fix. Right, that'll do us. Thank you very much. Goodbye.